Sue. Welcome to the Crypto Bahamas edition of the FTX podcast.
Interesting. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you here. Sue is the founder, CEO, and CIO of Three Arrows Capital, and it's great to have you on for a second time. I think the first episode that we did, we discussed your background and how you got into cryptocurrency. It's been almost 2 years since we did that first episode, about a year and a half. I'd like to hear a little bit about Three Arrows in that time period, and maybe let's go back to that time when DeFi was in full swing. It was DeFi summer. You can tell me a little bit how the firm looked then and perhaps some of the transitions to how it looks now.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it feels like 20 years ago, honestly. It's incredible how time flies in crypto. But I guess, yeah, back then, DeFi, I think the perimeters were just being formed, and kind of the building blocks for what we have today on a multi-chain world we weren't, I mean, the people weren't sure yet what would become dominant and what would become, obsolete by new technology. And I think, a year and a half later, there's obviously huge changes in the markets where, layer one protocols like Solana, Avalanche, others have come out. And also there has been a lot of interest in different parts of crypto, not just financial apps, but also cultural apps such as NFTs and so on. So I think the market and the crypto industry in general has really blossomed, I think, in this period in ways where it is very much following Amara's law, which is that youth is underestimated in the long run as the technology. And so I think every day now, just recently with StepN, right, with just this idea that people are going to buy these shoes and then walk around and somehow mind through walking. It's now becoming, that's to me is like an Axie moment almost, where Axie kind of proved that play to earn was a new model, and now you have walk to earn as a model, and I think this will just continue. So I think for us as a firm, not as much has changed. I mean, we kind of try to be as zen as possible throughout the market. So we definitely continue to invest in the major themes that we see are important, and I also think that it is more clear now than before that we are in a multi-chain world. We are also in a cross-chain world. So I think focus on infrastructure, but also focus on applications still, I think is kind of our core beliefs.
And how would you describe Three Arrows? Somebody asked you what type of firm it is.
I think we kind of invest broadly in Web3 as well as store value theses in crypto. And our DNA is a trading DNA, meaning that we historically trade a lot of Bitcoin and Ether and other large coins. And so the general model that we believe since the beginning is that we trade to make more coins. So that's a philosophy that has served us well, because we always make sure we put profits into investing more into crypto. I'd say that's kind of it's one of the only things that sets us apart from a lot of trading firms for that period, where many firms did well, but they mainly invested in dollars or invested back in the real world. Whereas for us, we really saw it as a privilege to be able to have a front seat view, front stage view, courtside view, whatever you want to call it, to the show. So I think that's kind of the privilege that we felt we had. And it's so similar for you guys in Alameda, right, where you kind of were a top trading firm and are a top trading firm, but then recognize that through that seat you have possibly there's so much more.
And so in the perspective there is that it's not necessarily like maximization of USD value. It's like we want to have more coins as a firm. Is that still sort of the ethos? Yeah.
Very much so, very much so. So, like for us, we have a much higher threshold to, let's say, be very bearish than most firms. Because for us, we've seen so many people, get priced out of the markets over the time. And I think the funny thing about 2018 really is that people think the lesson is that you should have sold and bought the bottom, but really what it is that if you just relax for a few months, you'll be fine in a lot of cases, right? And that's something that, and also that when there's a lot of despair, you can start buying. You don't have to follow the despair as well, right? So, because actually I saw a lot of people in 2018 actually held all the way down. As it went up, they would start selling all the way up. So even before Bitcoin broke 14K, by then a lot of people were fully out of Ether at under 200, or they're out of Bitcoin already, and they're out of Sol, they're out of a lot of things, right? So I do think that I have this theory that people always learn the wrong lesson from history, and I think it's happening again there, where people learn the lesson that 2018 you have to celebrate. It's actually, in my opinion, not the lesson of 2018. So
That makes sense. Something I'm curious about too is, what's allowed you guys to create this type of firm versus being beholden to this sort of like USD value, which is what sets the benchmark for your firm? Like, how did you get to the point where you said, I want to have more Bitcoin, I want to have more Ether, I want to have more X coin, this is what matters?
well, we were very fortunate in that we started the company very young. We were 24 at that time doing EM foreign exchange, but about a year later we had only our own capital, so partner capital, and so after that it was always it was always quite thesis driven, and it was like we were not beholden to anyone as an LP basically. So because of that, I think we kind of felt that as crypto is a trend, it's something where it's important to see one's role in the ecosystem and see one's role in history as well, because I think we are all part of history at this point, and part of what's happening around the world. And so for us, I think it was just like a very strong sense that we were part of history, and that meant many things, but especially that there's incredible opportunity in volatility, and also incredible opportunity just by attendance, right? I mean, if you think about the opportunities that we've had, or that many individuals have had already, just by being there and believing, it's incredible. And I think crypto is kind of like justification by faith, almost, in a way that it's kind of evolved. And I think a lot of the mistakes I saw from people were if they were almost too good at market neutral trading, they would really dig into that and define themselves that way. And there would be a lot of kind of angst at the fact that people could just buy coins and then relax and stake them and make a lot more money in dollars. And I think it didn't have to be that way for them, because if they had seen kind of the ways that just by the fact that there was so much volume, so much activity, that they could also participate not just through arbitrage or through this trading or that trading, but also through belief in the ecosystem. That belief would in fact be rewarded. I think that was something that we had a strong sense of, and that we would not easily give up as a conviction, I think.
You touched on this a little bit, but I think that there's more here as far as you and Kyle not just being the LPs, which allowed you to control the funds and do what you wanted, but I think that you guys have an ethos that resonates with this decentralized nature and permissionless nature of the space. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how that captured your imagination, how that continues to drive your conviction.
Sure. I mean, I think that, both Kyle and I, we have a deep held belief that crypto is part of a movement that is bringing a lot of freedom to the world. And it has good and some bad consequences depending on who people are. There's a lot of disruption happening, and there's a lot of technology creating inequality, and also creating a lot of disintermediation, right? But with that said, I think for the individual, for the average person who wants to learn, who wants to grow, crypto has really leveled the playing field, right? Whether that's young developers in India that have done extremely well in DeFi, creating projects, or NFT artists in Iran, in places that they don't have to say who they are, right? We can all kind of move toward a more pseudonymous world, and also a more distributed world. So like one of the books that we kind of basically hold as our Bible almost is The Sovereign Individual. And I think that from that perspective, the key thrust of that book was really that every 500 years there's mega political changes that happen around the world, and these are led by technology disruptions that are far outside the realm of people deciding how they feel about such technology. Meaning that in the 1500 era, with the advent of printing press and the advent of gunpowder revolution, it did not really matter what the aristocracy felt about it. It was something that was going to happen anyways, and the way that it evolved would be so on and so forth, but that it would have profound implications. And that's what I believe we are in today with encryption and peer-to-peer technologies. I think that's in fact we're probably still not even past the first inning of a lot of this disruption, because the end games of this can be very tricky and very interesting to think about. And so I think, it's important, despite the fact that crypto, a lot of people come just to make some quick money or to buy some, cute pictures. At the end of the day, they are also participating in something that's very profound, I think. And I think the beauty of all movements like this is that they don't even have to know it, but they, just by seeing the incentives and then seeing the communities form and seeing what's happening, they contribute to it already. And so I think for Khan and I, we feel that this will be, while disruptive, it's something that's very worth fighting for. And I think it will be a future that is far more innovative and also far more distributed than it was before. The analogy I like to give is like even the Dark Ages, right? Where the Dark Ages is known as a period that was very bad and whatever, but after the fall of the Roman Empire, the average farmer actually began to control his own land. He had zero taxes, and he started to live much longer as well. And he, the life expectancy went up a lot, as well as the technology of agriculture actually improved a lot at that time with the plow. And so I kind of think of it almost like, are we entering the Dark Ages, but in a good way, I think, potentially, right? Where we may not define success as the same way as we used to, right? We may not define success as a company that takes half of all the users' profits or their earnings. That may not be success in this new world, but it may be something else where, people have more control over things. And so I do think that crypto is part of all of that. And we want people involved to also understand that this is something worth fighting for the long run.
So 2 questions on that. One is, if I may ask, what's an ideal sort of scenario that this evolves into if things go correctly? And then the second question is, how can we be stewards to get to that scenario?
So I think there's a lot of key battles that will happen over the next few years. I think we need to win the unhosted wallet battle in crypto, and that will be a tough one. But I think the key is to make sure that crypto is not put in the same boxes as previous financial regulation, and for people to sort of see past that and see the potential of the technology to improve lives and to improve financial inclusion, as well as to improve the way things work. So that's a very key battle. And I think that it is a battle that in free nations, it will be won, because in free nations, the Bill of Rights and so on, it's considered unalienable rights. So I think they will be able to argue from such grounds to ultimately stunt or limit the impact of, say, hosted wallet rules and these kind of things, just from the right to privacy and the right to be secure in one's person and all these kinds of things. I think that that's a very important battle to win, because without that battle, I do think that what crypto is quite different from what it could be. In the extreme negative scenario of that, where it goes extreme high travel rule and things like this, it becomes a permission chain. Actually, again, it becomes a permission database, and you haven't actually done anything in many ways. So that's, I think, the biggest battle, and I think we will win it in the places that matter. And I think the thing that as stewards of the space that I think is important is to one, help highlight the ways that crypto is improving the world and improving the ability to transact, as well as the ability for creators to reach their fans without intermediation. These kinds of the benefits of disintermediation, right? And I think also to show that the kind of regulations that people want to put against crypto, that if they zoom out, they see that the existing world is not subject to the same scrutiny as people are putting on crypto, and that the reasons for this are obviously not that crypto is specifically causing those things, but that crypto is being attacked, for instance, with sanctions or with things like this, to use it as an excuse to stun technology, right? Mm-hmm. And this has been the historical pattern for many technologies in the past. But I do think as crypto becomes everywhere, we will see the opposite within 30 years, where I think regulation will actually preference crypto over other things. So we saw this with the car, right? With the cars, in the beginning, everyone's like, you're going to run over everyone with cars. But then within some time, they started to make jaywalking a crime. The idea that when you cross the street as a human, that's somehow like, that the car has priority over the human on the road that the person, happily walked on, just a few years earlier. And so I think we'll see the same thing in crypto. And I think this will be kind of when we know we've really made it, right? Where, governments actually, for libertarians, right? Governments come together to protect the unalienable rights that we already have. That's kind of the natural worldview of a libertarian. So I think we will, in the end game, come to this world where governments are trying to uphold your ability to transact. And so if someone's, hurting your ability to transact, governments will actually be a force for protecting that right. Not all governments, but many will see this as kind of a rule of law that people come to count on and come to value as well. So.
And do you think in some ways we're beholden to the governments to realize this? Because if you look back at the printing press and at gunpowder, the printing press, people could print sedition whenever they wanted and spread it. And they could, throw cannonballs at the aristocracy's castles and demolish them and come in and cut off their heads. Yes. With crypto, it's a bit more different.
Yes.
So do you think it's a dynamic where we have to make sure those in government help us get to the place, or is there a way for like a groundswell movement to change things?
I think there's kind of, yes, definitely the possibility of without violence this time, because the force of coercion and physical violence is not as strong. Because the printing press, for instance, there's locations where you have to print, right? And there's a physical element to it. Whereas in crypto, in some cases, the people are known and where they are, but in many cases they're not. And also there's an accelerationism to the government's logic too, where if they push against it too hard, then it forces the industry to evolve very private technologies and in even more subversive direction potentially. And so I think there's already an accommodationism that has come through most governments where they want to, at the end of the day, the question is, what is a government, right? Is a government some entity that is, separate from what people are, right? Or individuals, and what gives government the right to tell people to do things, right? There's this fascinating idea in ancient, medieval times and well before as well, which is that who can create laws? And back then, the rulers, they had no concept that they could create laws. They thought law was natural, or law was like a human concept, like a holy concept. So the laws are already known. So and then governments don't create laws; they simply try to uphold laws. So laws like "Thou shalt not kill" and things like this. And I think, that being the case, it's like as crypto becomes popular with people and part of people's lives. What is the cause for governments to be still against it? Well, of course, it's the instinct for government to retain the privileges that it's had, right? And these privileges include seigniorage and money and inflation, but also incumbents in being able to capture value from users and from citizens in certain ways. And this will be a tricky battle, and I think there will be a lot of skirmishes on this. But I think that the government's will to fight this will be more limited than people expect. I think it's already been more limited than people expect, where within just a few short years where everyone thought crypto was dead, now you have many politicians pro-crypto, you have many places trying to become crypto jurisdictions. And then again, part of the reason is because the voice of what people do is starting to matter because of technology, right? Whether it's Arab Spring, whether it's people being able to record out on their phones what's happening in a country, and propaganda doesn't work anymore in the same ways. And so those are all mega trends that are very in favor of peer-to-peer capitalism, peer-to-peer money, peer-to-peer culture. So
That's a very interesting concept. And I'm curious, for example, Three Arrows, right? You guys have grown to be quite a large firm in the space and you have a very powerful presence. Are you guys also working with sort of these intelligent minds that are advocating in these skirmishes? Or how are you guys getting involved? And maybe how should large firms get involved or large players in the space?
I mean, I think each firm, that they have their own view on the things that that the way policy should go, and also the things that should be done. I think it is important to present the views of firms and also to be clear on the things that matter. So with that said, there's always differences between firms as well. Some firms in the space have chosen to go a very global view of things, like a Binance, for instance, and their view of the world has turned out to be quite true in many ways, right? And same with an FTX, right, which started also more unregulated and then now is becoming more regulated. And I think for us as a thesis too, we've historically believed in this. So during the bear market, we saw a lot of highly regulated plays where the guys said, I'm going to get the first license here, the first license there, and then I'm going to hire 50 bankers and I'm going to do all this and do all that. And I just thought, this is not the point, right? The point is that governments will accommodate the innovation and the actions anyways, not that we will first ask for all the permissions. And I think this whole idea is actually, it's native to the American spirit as well, the frontier environment or the frontier concept, which is that you should be doing things where laws don't exist for them, or that the laws are not clear for them as much as possible in terms of innovation. Because if the laws already exist, then it means that someone's already done it and wrote the law for you. So it's not technology, right? For instance, when the car was invented, there were no laws about cars. So today, because we are sort of seeing the blow off top in politics and in the idea that the legislator is so powerful, the idea of illegal versus legal is an incredibly taboo concept where it's like, wow, this is illegal or this is legal. But even someone like Gandhi who said, if something is illegal, that's just people talking about things. But there are other forms of knowing what should be done or what shouldn't be done. So in many cases, the interpretation of law is far murkier than people think. So in other words, does a law apply in a case in certain cases, or does it not apply in certain cases? I think that these are questions that what we have seen in the space is a great example is the Ethereum ICO, right? Where many people were saying it's a security for many years, and now you've seen even someone like Gensler who wants to claim it's still a security, it's not decided. No one cares what he says. It just doesn't matter, because again, the people who create laws and create these kind of things, they're also just people talking about things, and they have the monopoly on violence. But when the monopoly on violence doesn't matter as much, or it's there are forces against it, then we have to start relying on an older form of knowledge, which is knowledge of natural laws or knowledge of natural moralities. And I think in a way, just as the gunpowder revolution and printing press kind of came to an end of the age of chivalry, right, and the age of these kind of oaths, we're almost entering an age of chivalry again, or the age of oaths. Because you think about blockchains, you think about core developers and a lot of what they're doing, it's very chivalric style to me. Someone like Do Kwon saying he's gonna bid everything up and he's gonna do this and do that, and he's making these bets, right? His $88 bet is a very chivalric style thing to do, right? So it's something Don Quixote style kind of thing, right? And so I think one of the reasons for that is because you do have a breakdown of what are the things that you need the government for, and the things that you need these laws to matter for, right? NFT is another great example, right? In theory, some country could now come and pass all sorts of laws about NFTs, but will anyone follow those laws? Of course not. And so this idea that people literally won't follow laws in mass civil disobedience or it's almost like not civil disobedience, almost like civil apathy, that we will see. Same as we saw in the 90s with Napster and file sharing. And same as we see now with NFTs and with a lot of stuff, and with de minimis tax, and people get $2 of mobile coin. Are they going to have to declare it on their IRS? All these things. The people will just do what they want to do, I think.
That's a fascinating concept. I love that, where you have a regression to the natural laws because there aren't frameworks already existing, and that's kind of like our archetypical state, right?
Yes.
That's really, really interesting. And something I've heard you speak about a little bit on Twitter is about sort of the European Union, who claim to be the heads of regulation on this and that.
Yes.
And you say that it's essentially a false state to be in.
Yes.
Why do you think they've gone in that direction? Like, what do you see has happened to this continent?
Well, I think that there's tremendous cultural power and pride in the countries and the people of European Union. I think that there's a big struggle between essentially a bureaucratic elite, as well as a kind of a sense that we must preserve the European ideals, and that this is kind of the final solution for the continent. So the end game, of the World Economic Forum types is very much in this direction, and to say we want command culture, meaning that we will tell you what to eat, we will tell you what to believe, we will tell you kinds of things, and you will be the model European citizen. And it's through these methods of control and through these methods of community collectivism that we will make it through the next wave. And so for that reason, WEF and the Communist Party have somehow been very close, because there's actually a lot of similarities with communism. So I think, that's of course the big irony of the 20th century, was that in the fight to fight communism, they actually, in many ways, more communist than the so-called communists, right? And of course, Sovereign Individual makes that point too, is that if you look at democratic socialism and communism, they're actually very similar.
Mm-hmm.
They're more similar than they are different, from the view of people in 200 or 300 years. And so Europe, now you have this fascinating thing in crypto, where the European Union really doesn't like a lot of parts of crypto, but individual nations within it like it a lot more. And then if you drill down even further, individual regions of individual nations like crypto a lot. And so I think that localism versus that pan-Europeanism is very revealing, I think. And it's similar in the US as well, where you have mayors and governors more pro-crypto than you have central governments. And so this is the devolution. This is the devolution of power back to the people. So, while, the 1984 writers and, people of that time thought we are just headed toward inexorably the panopticon and total control, actually that's not true, because as Julian Assange says, encryption means that it's much harder to figure out what two numbers were multiplied than to multiply them, right? And that's in the structure of the universe. So what that means is that in the structure of the universe, it's actually not true that we have to tend toward authoritarianism, or we have to tend toward mass control as a species. Actually, there are many strong forces the other way, meaning the ability of one person to send to another person a message that a government, no matter how many nuclear weapons they have, they cannot read that message. And so I think that that's the duality of man, right? And I think Europe has found itself on the side of sort of the communist side. But I think that it has a lot of power within it to go the other way. So that's why we see Lisbon, we see a lot of activity, in Lugano, in North Italy, and Switzerland as well. I think, and hopefully increasingly in Dublin in the UK. I think localism is how crypto wins, and eventually this will have many geopolitical implications as well, in terms of both transfer payments to larger polities, as well as, how people define their identities. So I think at some point EU may realize this as well and say, we can't be just anti-crypto, or we can't lead on regulation. And getting back to your lead on regulation question, I think the reason why places will say they lead on regulation is when they already see it's a defeatist attitude, and they say, I cannot win on innovation. I don't want to try to win on innovation. But deep in that logic is that I don't want to lose control, actually. It's because they want to say there's no other way. Anything you do, it doesn't matter. So listen to me, because your innate creativity cannot possibly create anything of value anyway. So I will tell you what is possible, and I will give you what is possible. And never mind that other people around the world are in fact creating these things that I will now tell you how to use them. Never mind that, so that doesn't work in an international age, I think.
Mm-hmm.
People are mobile. So the same rails that that companies use for globalization, they now use to move around. So if you have that policy like in Europe, people will just leave, right? I mean, what we're seeing in India now, right? India with the crypto tax, people just leave. They go to Dubai, they go to Singapore, they go elsewhere. And you cannot, start creating laws that don't allow people to leave. If you started to doing that, then it's really an emperor wears no clothes moment, where then you can no longer pretend that you do anything for the sake of the people, as opposed to the collectivist extortion of power, essentially.
Yep. Oh, that's beautifully put. Thank you for breaking it down like that. And I'm gonna do a part back to Three Arrows, because I'm curious about something I've been wanting to ask you for a while. Is that I've seen Three Arrows has taken an approach where you guys have gotten into NFTs quite deeply, but you've done it through another team that you've empowered. You guys have a venture arm, but you've done it through another team that you've empowered.
Yeah.
What was the decision making in making this decentralized rather than all within the Three Arrows firm directly?
Well, I think I'm a big believer in youth and the idea that in each wave, you need to try to back the people who came out of that wave, or people who really kind of grew up in that wave. And so for DeFi, we did that with NFTs. We did that as well. And I think that we'll continue to do that as things evolve, because ultimately, as young founders, we just believe in the idea that talent is often very young. And so as we get older, we're not going to be able to see all the trends ourselves. So the importance of delegating that kind of idea generation is really important.
That makes a lot of sense. And through this empowerment of youth, how do you recognize this talent? Because, I understand that you guys are in a position now where, as again, Three Arrows, quite a large firm in the space, and everyone wants a moment of your time. How are you able to do sort of the separation from the things that you have to do for the firm, and then also exploring and meeting people who you're not sure if they are sort of like valuable or they care truly or not?
I think there's always good heuristics. I think, bear markets do help bring out those heuristics better. So now it is harder, because there's harder to tell who's lucky and who was right place, right time, and who really understands it and gets it. But I think, there's a tendency for sort of very talented young people to want to go their own way.
Mm-hmm.
So if I see this attitude of going your own way and kind of thing, I often quite respect that. So, if they drop out of school, that's always a good sign. Or if they, start a project, not for the money as well, that's also a very good sign. So I think those are kind of the markers that we can look for and so there's obviously red flags on the other side of that, which is like, people, the classic red flag that everyone knows about is that if they need to pay themselves a salary or to like buy something, or they're very like, they have a cushy life kind of thing. That's always a big warning sign. Or if they, are very focused on not in the communities and understanding the products, but sort of what's going up the fastest on any given day, right? And so, I think a lot of the young people in this space, they are still like traders, they're flippers. So some may be talented at it, some may ride a bull market, but broadly speaking, it's difficult to scale that, and it's also not the recipe for large exponential growth, in my opinion. Less than 1% of them will find that, I think, and then most will underperform, just people who just buy only or even just collect. So I think those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And one last question for you, Sue, is perhaps some advice you could leave us, maybe from the sovereign individual or from somewhere else, that would allow me, the listeners, to live a better life, something that's allowed you to live a better life.
Sure. There's a really good quote from Sovereign Individual where it talks about Carl Jung. He met an American businessman who made it when he's 40. He dreamed his whole life of making it and then retiring. And he had a beautiful young family. He was traveling Europe with them, seeing art museums and just loving life. But then he fell into a depression and he went to see Carl Jung and he wanted to figure out what was going wrong. Actually, I think in the story, his wife had him go to the psychologist, and the psychologist, after looking at it very closely and talking to him, he said it's very common because it's actually the achievement once achieved can be a source of pain as well, because the struggle is actually more beautiful than the achievement in many cases. So I think what I try to tell people, because there are a lot of young people not making life-changing wealth for themselves, and I think some handle it better than others, because it's such a big shock and big impact, right? But I think what's important for them to understand is that often it's better to keep on working and keep on doing what you love, as opposed to let money change your lifestyle too much or define who you are. Because as humans, we intrinsically find more virtue in struggle than achievement. Actually, the idea even of achievement is a modern idea, right? Because if you think about the hunter-gatherer, he does not achieve. He simply hunts and he eats and he enjoys the time with his, it's a different way of conceptualizing the world. So the idea of almost achievements is unnatural, and it's like the fixation on them, and especially the belief that the achievement will cause the happiness is a modern belief that creates a lot of suffering and creates a lot of sadness for people, because once they get the achievement, they then ask themselves, why are they not much happier? When in reality, they were happier during the struggle. And, so that I think also helps people who are struggling, but they see that, for them to see that there is beauty in the struggle as well. And then that's some of the best moments when you look back will be, when firms are just starting and things are the toughest, right? And you think back to it and it's like those, you wish you could be there again. So.
Yeah, thank you. That resonates a lot with me. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
And thanks for having me.